Hi, my name is Marsha, and I'm a student at Florida State College at Jacksonville. And today I will be doing a presentation on violence in the workplace. So first, I would like to sort of define for you what workplace violence actually is. So workplace violence basically means any kind of damaging action, whether it be a physical or a psychologically damaging action that occurs while a person is on duty. Some examples would be a direct physical assault, whether it's with a weapon or not. It can actually mean some kind of a verbal or written threat, physical or verbal harassment, and also it can mean homicide. Workplace violence is classified into four different categories. Type 1 involves criminal intent. This is basically when a perpetrator has no relationship to a business or its employees, but they commit some kind of an act on a victim there. Type 2 is when the person does have a relationship to that business, say it's the client, customer, or patient. They're receiving services with this particular business, and at some point they become violent or commit some kind of an act that is in line with the definition of workplace violence. Also, type 3 is worker on worker violence. This is something that is very rare. As we all know that there are conflicts when it comes down to working with other people, but they typically don't escalate to what could be assumed as like a workplace violence, but it is something that can occur. Type 4 is personal relationships. This is something like a patient's, a nurse's family member or spouse or husband, somebody who is related to the employee that they know personally comes in and commits some kind of a threat or physical assault on that person while on duty. Um, while these four different categories are very interesting, type 1 and type 2 are really ones that affect healthcare workers the most. So here are some facts about workplace violence that I think you should find interesting, especially if you're a healthcare worker. It says that healthcare workers are 4 times more likely to be assaulted while at work than private sector individuals. And sort of to break that down, let me give you some numbers. In 2014, about over 15,000 people in the private sector were injured while at work. 67% of these people were female. 69% of them were healthcare workers, and 23% of them had to spend more than 31 days at home recovering from whatever assault happened while at work, while 20% of them had to spend about 3 to 5 days from work. So this is something that is very serious and can have serious consequences. A lot of times these incidents, especially in healthcare, they go undocumented or underreported. Actually, 80 to 90% of healthcare workers have said they have experienced some kind of a verbal abuse. But a lot of times this particular kind of workplace violence is underreported because it's something that is seen as being a part of nursing. It's a part of our job. So some of the consequences of having sort of attitudes like that and thinking that these things are sort of normal and a part of practice is that, that the consequences are sometimes very serious, leading to minor or serious physical injuries, temporary or permanent disability, psychological trauma, death. And that's just on the opposite, most extreme end of the spectrum. Now, the other end, which is, not as extreme, but is just as important, is it can cause increased job stress, which can decrease job satisfaction. It will cause more absenteeism, family turmoil. A lot of times when you're stressed at work or working in violent areas, you sort of take that anguish home with you and take it out on family members. Also, it can cause high worker turnover. People are not going to want to stay in an environment that they feel is unsafe, so they're going to quit and try to do other things. So it's important that we find resolutions to this. And the most important way to try to resolve issues related to workplace violence is through prevention. That's basically, you want to make sure that there is an A, B, and C point plan in place to deal with violent incidences, whether there be threats or otherwise. You want to make sure that, everybody is communicating appropriately and that everything is going up and down the chain of command appropriately so everyone is aware of where the threats are. Also, de-escalation. A lot of times when you're working as a nurse, or when you're working as a leader, a lot of times, sometimes incidents cannot be avoided. Incidents of workplace violence just cannot be avoided. They have gone too long unnoticed, and they just can't be avoided. And sometimes you don't know when somebody's about to snap. And so a lot of times communication skills are best. It's best to teach nurses communication skills so they can know how to de-escalate violence, before it occurs. Well, how to de-escalate anger when it occurs. Make sure that people are listening to their patients, and making sure that people take threats seriously and document appropriately. And this is where, good leadership comes in play. It's very important. In order to do those three things mentioned on the previous slide, you have to basically have the appropriate environment. And it all starts with leadership. And here are some of the leadership styles that are not bad leadership styles, but they do not really work well when we're talking about workplace violence. And the first one is authoritarian leadership style. An authoritative leadership style is very, I versus the group. It's sort of a one-way highway, my way or no way type of leadership. And this may work good in like emergency situations where we need somebody who is going to get in there, tell us what needs to be done, and expect complete compliance. But when we're talking about workplace violence, collaboration is very, very much key. And, everybody's feelings have to be considered. And we have to be concerned with the feelings and of the collective, not just the feelings of the leader, who may not be in direct contact with a lot of these incidents. So it's very important that we put the right leaders in place. So a laissez-faire type of leadership style is also, it's like the opposite of the authoritarian. It's a little bit more lax, and this particular leader is not going to sort of be a drill sergeant. They're sort of going to let people sort of make up their own rules and only come in if need be. And this particular leader is not really a good leader for this particular workplace violence, because the consequences are so serious. You have to have, like I mentioned before, an ABC plan on how to deal with workplace violence. And you can't leave anything to chance and anything to someone's assumptions. We have to make sure that the proper communication is taken, and all nurses, everybody underneath the leader sort of knows what the plan is so they can act appropriately. So the leadership style that I think that is most appropriate for workplace violence would be the democratic leadership style. This particular leader makes sure that others are involved in decision making, because workplace violence does not just affect the one victim, it affects everybody. If something happens to one of your coworkers, it is something that can affect everyone emotionally. And so because everybody's emotions and health and welfare can be affected, we want to make sure everybody has input. And so a democratic leader is important here. Also, we want to make sure, because of workplace violence and how serious it is, we want to make sure the lines of communication are open. And typically with a democratic leader, communication flows up and down the chain of command. So everybody sort of feels like their voices are heard. And it's always an emphasis on we rather than I. Like I said, the collective has to be considered, feelings of the collective, but everybody should be following the same plan. And that's why communication is key. And also, which is different from the laissez-faire type of, leadership style, a democratic leader is going to offer constructive criticism. They're going to make sure that, everybody that's under them doesn't feel, beat down, but that they know when something is not right. So that when it comes to that point where there is a violent incident or threat of violence in the workplace, that everybody is doing the right thing and not just doing what they think should be done. So these are my references, and that's basically everything that I had to say about workplace violence. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and thank you for watching.